Hey, good afternoon and welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. We're in video number 39 of our study of Matthew 16, 27, and 28. And tonight, this afternoon rather, I want to deal with the false teaching of the premillennial dispensational paradigm concerning the rapture of the church. And their primary text, their key text that they draw this doctrine from is 1 Thessalonians 4, 15 through 17. They don't see this for what it is, the parousia of Jesus Christ at the time of the resurrection in the first century generation. They understand this to be a separate event completely called the rapture of the church, a completely unbiblical doctrine. We're going to see very, very clearly that 1 Thessalonians 4 and the parousia of the Lord in that passage is none other than the coming of the Son of Man in both Matthew 24 and 25, which is the Olivet discourse, and Matthew 16, 27 and 28, and it was the coming of the Lord at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Now, let me begin by reading the text in 1 Thessalonians 4, and then we'll jump in and make some powerful connections here. 1 Thessalonians 4, 15 through 17 says this, "For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we always be with the Lord." In the next chapter, 5 verse 1 and 2, it says this. It continues. This is not a different prophecy. This is the same discourse of Paul concerning the same event. "Now, as to the times and epochs, or seasons, brethren, you have no need that anything be written to you, for you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night." I'll stop right there. The day of the Lord in 1 Thessalonians 5 is the parousia of the Lord at the time of the resurrection in 1 Thessalonians 4. Okay, they are a united discourse concerning the coming of the Lord. Now, as I just mentioned, dispensational premillennial doctrine identifies this passage as the rapture of the church. Well, that's a huge problem for that paradigm because, as we'll see momentarily, 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 is perfectly parallel with the coming of the Son of Man in the Olivet discourse in Matthew 24 and 25. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read a chart to you now that I will put on the website that lists 24 perfect parallels between the two passages, which means that they're identical and they are parallel texts concerning the AD 70 second coming of Christ at the fall of Jerusalem and the end of the Jewish age. Notice the perfect parallels. 1 Thessalonians 4:13, Paul says, "We don't want you to be misinformed." Jesus in Matthew 24:14 says, "See that no one misleads you." Okay? And 1 Thessalonians 4:15, it is the parousia of the Lord. In Matthew 24:30, it is the parousia of the Lord. 1 Thessalonians 4:14, those who have fallen asleep. And Matthew 24 and 31, it is the elect. The elect were those out of the Jewish nation who had fallen asleep prior to Christ. 4:17 of Thessalonians, it says to meet the Lord in the air. And in Matthew 25:6, the virgins go out to meet the bridegroom. There was a meeting in both texts. 1 Thessalonians 4:17 concerns the clouds. They meet the Lord in the clouds. And in Matthew 24:30, the coming of the Son of Man is on the clouds. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, it is with the trumpet of God. And in Matthew 24:31, it is the sound of the great trumpet. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, it is the voice of the archangel. And in Matthew 24:31, he sends forth his angels. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, the dead in Christ rise. And in Matthew 24:32, all nations are gathered together. That is the time of the resurrection, obviously. 1 Thessalonians 5:2, Paul says, "For you yourselves know." And Matthew 24:25, Jesus said, "I have told you in advance." They were to know. They did know. 1 Thessalonians 5:2, it is the day of the Lord. And in Matthew 24:42, it is the day of your Lord's coming. 1 Thessalonians 5:1 concerns times and seasons. Matthew 24:36 concerns the day and the hour. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, then destruction will come, it says. And in Matthew 24:21, then will be great tribulation. 1 Thessalonians 5:2, he comes like a thief in the night. And Matthew 24:43, he comes like a thief in the night. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, it says, like labor pains. And Matthew 24, verse 8, these are the beginning of birth pangs. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, they will not escape. Matthew 24:39, the flood took them all away. They would not escape, just like in the days of Noah. In 1 Thessalonians 5:7, those who sleep, sleep at night. Matthew 25:5, concerning the virgins, they got drowsy and began to sleep. You see the perfect connections. 1 Thessalonians 5:6, let us be alert. Matthew 24:42, therefore be on the alert, Jesus said. 1 Thessalonians 5:7, those who get drunk. Matthew 24:29, those who would not be prepared would eat and drink with drunkards. 1 Thessalonians 5:5, sons of light, sons of the day. Those were the righteous, those who had ears to hear, they would understand. And in Matthew 25:4, they took oil with their lamps. They were illuminated. In 1 Thessalonians 5:5, they were the sons of night or sons of darkness. And in Matthew 25:3, those were the virgins who took no oil in their lamps. 1 Thessalonians 5:9, the wicked destined for wrath. And in Matthew 25:46, the wicked go into eternal punishment. 1 Thessalonians 5:8, the righteous had the hope of salvation. And in Matthew 24:13 and 25:34, the righteous are saved. They inherit the kingdom. And finally, both passages concern the element of time which is limited. It limits this prophecy to the first century generation. In 1 Thessalonians 4:15 and 17, Paul tells his readers that we, them, who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord. It was a first century expectation according to Paul. And Jesus in Matthew 24:34 tells his generation, this generation will not pass away until all these things be fulfilled. Listen, 1 Thessalonians 4 and the coming of the Lord is not a pre-tribulational, future to us rapture event. It was the second coming of Christ in fulfillment of the Olivet discourse, which Jesus placed at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Now, let me make one more connection. Notice the comparisons now between Matthew 16:27 and 28, Matthew 24, which those are parallel texts, and 1 Thessalonians 4. Now watch this. All three passages concern the coming of the Son of Man. All three passages concern his coming with angels. All three passages concern his coming with reward. And all three passages limit the coming of the Lord in these events to the first century generation. Again, Paul says we who are alive and remain. Matthew 24 says this generation. And Matthew 16:27 and 28, Jesus said, some of you standing here will not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The coming of the Lord, the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 16:27 and 28 was the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 24 and 25, and the parousia of the Son of Man in 1 Thessalonians 4 and 5 at the day of the Lord when he came to both bring reward and destruction to Israel at the time of their resurrection. And that took place at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The dispensational premillennial camp has two options. Either they admit that 1 Thessalonians 4, Matthew 24 and 25, and Matthew 16, which are all parallel prophecies, all concern the rapture of the church, and they're not yet fulfilled. Or that camp must admit that 1 Thessalonians 4, Matthew 24, 25, and Matthew 16 all concern the same coming of the Lord at the same time, which they place as the first century generation, and therefore the premillennial rapture doctrine falls to the ground. This is the truth concerning the rapture. There is no rapture. Their rapture text is a resurrection text. It is the second coming text. It is a day of the Lord text that Paul, Jesus, and all the apostles placed at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The rapture is an unbiblical doctrine, and it's an ungodly doctrine. It's a doctrine of defeat that must be squashed out. And we must help them see, help these people who just, for whatever reason, I'm not judging anybody, for whatever reason, they can't see these connections, and they are blinded from the truth of the glorious gospel of the fulfillment of the kingdom of heaven and the redemption that is in Jesus Christ today. So I hope that's been a blessing. Just understand the rapture doctrine. It is identical to the coming of the Son of Man in Matthew 24:25 and Matthew 16, and therefore it must be identified as a first century, second coming of Christ in AD 70. We'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.